Hi, boys and girls. I'm going to go ahead and show you where you can find your assignment for Social Studies, Lesson 5.3, The Course of the Cold War. To start, you're going to go to your Social Studies course. You're going to scroll down to the HTS Supplemental Resources. We are in Module 5, Social Changes. We're looking at Lesson 5.3, The Course of the Cold War. So you're going to open that folder and click on that first tab. And with this lesson, there are quite a few different parts. So you want to make sure that you read each of the parts in each of these sections carefully. And then you're going to want to pull up, and if you scroll all the way to the bottom, you're going to want to pull up the 5.3 assessment sheet. So I'm going to go ahead and open that. And this is a lengthy assessment sheet, or this is a lengthy assessment. It's about 5 pages long, but there's a few charts on here. So that's why it's taking up bigger portions of the paper. So just keep that in mind that it is pretty long, but a lot of them, I think there's like 3 parts that are actually a chart or a graphic organizer. So now that the assessment's pulled up, I'm going to go over each part and what you're doing for each part. All right, so part 1, continue to investigate the course of the Cold War. So for part 1, you've got 2 steps. For step 1, you're going to read the article, The Cold War Deepens. And then for step 2, you're going to complete the Pick 3 and GIST graphic organizer under part 1 of your assessment sheet, which is attached below, and we already have that open. So let's go take a look at the Pick 3 and GIST graphic organizer. So it's also labeled by parts on your assessment sheet. So here's part 1, the Pick 3 and GIST graphic organizer. This is focusing on the article that you read, The Cold War Deepened. And what you're doing for this graphic organizer is you are coming up with 4 key ideas, also known as main ideas, 4 important things that you read in the text. And then what is the evidence that supports that key idea or that main idea? What is that evidence that you found within the text? And then what you're going to do, so you're going to come up with a main idea and then evidence from the text to support it. And then you're going to do that for the second box. Another main idea and evidence from the text to support it. So your key ideas or your main ideas should be in your own words, and then your evidence from the text would come from the text. Then what you're going to do for the GIST summary statement is you're going to put these together into a 4 to 5 sentence summary. That should be pretty easy because you should have a sentence for each, the key idea and the evidence. So that should be pretty easy to come up with a 4 to 5 sentence summary of the different key ideas that you read and the evidence that supports it. So that's what you're doing for the Pick 3 and GIST graphic organizer. Then part 2. Throughout the Cold War, the United States and the Soviet Union competed with one another to make a greater achievement in space travel, technology, and exploration. It's time to explore this space competition. You're going to watch this video, The Space Race, and while you're watching the video, what I would suggest doing is look at questions 1 through 7 under part 2 first, and that way you can watch the video with a purpose. So you're going to answer questions 1 through 7 while you watch the video or after you watch the video, but I would suggest looking at the questions first. That way you have a good idea of what you should be looking for, listening for. So let's look at questions 1 through 7 that you're going to answer with the video. And notice that it's bolded and highlighted here. You're going to answer the questions in complete sentences. So number 1, what is the space race? To answer that in a complete sentence, you would start it by saying the space race was, and then fill in the blank. Number 2, who was the first to launch a satellite into orbit? And that should have a question mark at the end there. But again, you're going to want to answer that question in a complete sentence. The first country to launch a satellite into orbit was, and you'd put the answer in. So just take the question and restate the question in your answer. Number 3, who launched the first man in space? When did they do this? Don't forget to answer both parts of that question. Number 4, who was the first American in space? And again, you're going to answer that question by restating the question and your answer. The first American in space was. Number 5, what date did JFK make the claim that America would be the first to land on the moon? Number 6, what is the name of the spacecraft that launched our astronauts to the moon? And number 7, what did Neil Armstrong say when he stepped on the moon? So you're going to answer those 7 questions as you watch or after you watch the video. Now let's move on to part 3. Part 3, similarly to the space race, the United States and the Soviet Union also competed in an arms race to achieve the greater weapons. It's time to investigate this weapons competition. So you're going to watch the video, The Arms Race - Cold War, and you're going to answer questions 8 through 10 on your assessment sheet under part 3. So let's go look at questions 8 through 10. Part 3, again, it's labeled, and you're going to answer these questions in complete sentences. Number 8, what was the most interesting thing you learned about the arms race? So as you're watching, think about something that really grabs your attention. Number 9, what was the most important thing that you learned about the arms race in terms of its impact on the Cold War? So with number 9, I want you to focus on the arms race and how it had an impact on the Cold War. And that's what you're writing down for number 9, is how the arms race had an impact on the Cold War. And then number 10, you're writing a 3 to 5 sentence summary about the arms race. Here's some things that you need to include. Include who was involved in the arms race, what technology was created during the arms race, and when did this all occur? Make sure you hit 3 of those pieces, and that could be a sentence each. A sentence on who was involved, a sentence on what technology was created, and a sentence on when it all occurred. There's your 3 sentences out of the 3 to 5 sentences that you need to include. Now, for some reason, if there's not enough room here for number 10, feel free to just add a sticky note or, use the back, but just make sure that you submit that part, or you can even move on to that next page here and continue your writing if that space isn't enough for 3 to 5 sentences. All right, let's take a look at part 4. How did the Cold War affect daily life in the United States? So now we're going to look at what was going on here in the United States during this time period and how were we affected by what was going on. For step 1, you're going to read the article, The Cold War Affects Life in the U.S., and you're going to answer questions 11 through 13 under part 4. Part 4, you're going to answer these questions in complete sentences. Number 11, what were many Americans fearful of during the Cold War? So in the United States, there was something that was going on during the Cold War that put a lot of fear within the people. What was that? What were the Americans fearful of during this time period of the Cold War? Number 12, do you feel they were just, which means right, to feel fearful? So that question, what that means is, do you think that the people had a right to be in fear? Explain why or why not. And then number 13, what did Senator McCarthy try to do, and what was his reason for doing so? So you're going to be seeing some things about Senator McCarthy. Make sure you pay attention to what you hear about that and focus on what was he trying to do here in the United States and why was he doing that? All right, part 5. The fight to control or contain communism played out in other countries. As a Cold War historian, it's time to explore the Korean War. So for step 1, you're going to read the article, The Korean War. Step 2, you're going to watch the video, Korean History for Kids. And step 3, you're going to complete the Korean War graphic organizer under part 5 of the assessment. Let's take a look at part 5. So with the Korean War graphic organizer, you've got the topic here in the middle, the Korean War, and what you're filling out on the small boxes are your 5 W's and your H. So who, what, where, when, why, and how. So who was involved in the war? What happened? Why did it happen? When did it happen? Where did it happen? And how did it happen? So you're answering those questions based on the Korean War from what you've read and what you see in the video. So that's part 5. Part 6 is very similar, but instead of focusing on the Korean War, which happened during the Cold War, we're going to explore the Vietnam War, which was another war that happened during the Cold War time, the Cold War era. So you're going to read the article, The Vietnam War. You're going to watch the video, Vietnam War Brief Overview, and then you're going to complete the Vietnam War graphic organizer under part 6. So taking a look at part 6, it's the same graphic organizer, but instead of focusing on the Korean War, we're focusing on the Vietnam War. And again, you're answering who, what, where, when, why, and how of the Vietnam War. Who was involved? What happened? Why did it happen? When did it happen? Where did it happen? And how did it happen? With that how piece, focus on how was the war fought. Okay, and then part 7. The Cuban Missile Crisis was the moment during the Cold War when 2 superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, came close to a nuclear war. It is time to explore this historic event. Step 1, you're going to watch the videos, the history of the Cuban Missile Crisis and the Cuban Missile Crisis, and you're going to answer questions 14 through 16 under part 7. So part 7, 14, what was the Cuban Missile Crisis? 15, how did it begin? And 16, who was involved in the Cuban Missile Crisis? You're going to answer those questions in complete sentences. Okay, and then part 8, you're going to submit your work. Make sure you submit all 5 pages of this graphic organizer to get full credit. Don't forget to submit a page. And then again, anywhere where it says to answer in complete sentences, please be sure to do so that you get your full credit. When you're done, you're going to click on this blue plus button and attach all 5 pages of that assessment.